Do you know the difference between empathy and sympathy? It's a distinction that can make or break your leadership. I've seen many leaders who think they're being empathetic, but are they really? Today, we're breaking it down what empathy truly is, what it isn't, and how you can start practicing it in your workplace this week. Let's dive in. Hey leader, welcome to the Culture Keepers podcast. I'm Kara List, your leadership coach. And on this podcast, we talk all things leadership to help you step into your most important role as a leader, a culture keeper. We're here to explore practical, real life tips that'll help you put your people and your mission first and create a happy, healthy workplace culture that everyone can thrive in. And before we jump into today's topic, I want to make sure you know about my weekly leadership tip. Every Thursday, I send out a practical, actionable leadership tip that you can apply to your role immediately. And these are my best tips. I don't share these tips anywhere else, so don't miss out. You can sign up by going to heycaralist.com/newsletter or by grabbing the link in the show notes. Today, we're diving into something every leader needs to understand. It's the difference between empathy and sympathy. Now, I have to say, Brené Brown is one of my favorite thought leaders on the topic of empathy. She breaks it down so well. She says this is so good. She says that empathy is feeling with people, while sympathy is feeling for people. And that difference, it changes everything when it comes to leadership. So let's get into it. Let's break it down together. Can you think of a time when someone on your team was struggling? Maybe it's happening right now, whether it's the work is piling up or something personal that's really hard to deal with. It's tough. We've all been there when nothing's going right. Everything feels overwhelming or lonely, helpless. It's a lot. Lately, I've been noticing more and more just people around me going through hard seasons. And as leaders, how we respond in those tough moments, it can really make a difference. Now, here's the thing. We're not responsible for fixing their problems. People heal and move forward on their own time. And the truth is, there are so many things at play that are out of our control. But how we show up for them, that we can control. And it really matters. Okay, so as long as you're not a sociopath or a narcissist, when you see a team member struggling, you'll have one of two responses: empathy or sympathy. You might think both are good, right? We need both. But I'm going to argue that sympathy is careless leadership. And honestly, it doesn't help as much as we think, or really at all. Let me explain why. Sympathy, although well-intentioned, can actually make things worse. Sympathy is built on three things that can prolong and amplify someone's struggle. The first is pity. When we pity someone, we're reinforcing their suffering without giving them a way forward. All we're doing is just calling out their junk and letting them sit in it. The second is victim status. When we treat someone like a victim, they start to see themselves that way. Now, I want to be really clear. Sometimes people are real victims of their circumstances. They may have faced true injustice, trauma, or hardship. It wasn't their fault. And empathy doesn't mean ignoring or downplaying that reality. It means acknowledging their experience without defining them by it. We don't speak to their pain as a permanent verdict on who they are. And the third is agreement. When we agree that the situation is terrible, we confirm that things are hopeless. This isn't helpful either. And then there's the failed rescue attempt that always seems to happen. We try to fix things by saying things like, well, at least this worst thing didn't happen, or offering a quick fix. But you know what? People don't want to be rescued. They want to be understood. So you might be thinking right now, hold up, has my well-meaning response been sympathy instead of empathy? Oh no. Let's break it down with a couple of real-world examples that will help. Imagine your team member, Jake, is struggling with a big project. He's overwhelmed, missing deadlines, feeling totally defeated. So a sympathetic response might sound something like this. Oh, Jake, I'm so sorry. This project is just way too much for you. I don't even know how you're handling it. Honestly, this whole situation is a mess. On the surface, it might feel supportive, but let's kind of break it down. So you have pity. You've reinforced that Jake is struggling, but you've offered no way out. There's victim status. By saying you don't know how he's handling it, you're confirming Jake's feeling of being stuck. And agreement. Instead of helping him find a way forward, you're validating the idea that this project is impossible. Now let's look at another one. Your friend Maria just got laid off unexpectedly, and she's facing a really tough financial situation. So a sympathetic response might sound like this. Oh, Maria, that's so unfair. I can't believe they did that to you. You must be devastated. Honestly, companies don't care about people at all. This is just awful. Let's break this one down. The pity, saying you must be devastated, just amplifies her pain without offering hope. The victim status, I can't believe they did that to you. It frames Maria as powerless. It reinforces the idea that she has no control over her future. And then agreement, this is just awful. It validates the worst part of this experience, making her feel even more hopeless. And this kind of sympathy might feel comforting at first, but it leaves people feeling stuck and defeated. Okay, so what does empathy look like? Empathy is a choice to connect with something inside yourself so that you can connect with someone else. And it requires a bit of effort. Dr. Teresa Wiseman outlines 4 key attributes of empathy. Perspective taking, seeing the world through someone else's eyes, recognizing their perspective as their truth. Now, you don't need to take this perspective on as your own or your own truth, but you need to have a clear picture of what they see. I'm thankful to have really great eyesight, but there have been times, especially as a kid, when I wanted to try on someone else's glasses just for fun. I'd put them on and it's a whole different world. I can't possibly know what they see unless I try on their glasses and get their view for myself. And we often think that because we acknowledge the circumstance someone is in, that we know their perspective. But we need to do deeper work. Assumption does us literally no good. Imagine you're looking at a Petri dish and you don't see much. You know there's bacteria in there. You can acknowledge that, but you can't see it. Then you take the extra effort, just the quick extra effort to slide it under the microscope and see for yourself what is really happening in that nasty little science experiment. And it changes everything, right? What you see. This is perspective taking. The second key attribute of empathy is staying out of judgment. This means resisting the urge to evaluate or fix. You don't need to make any claims or perform an assessment when it comes to what is going on with them. Your judgment does nothing to help. Next is recognizing and understanding emotion, saying, I'm sensing you're feeling frustrated. Is that right? You can call out what you're hearing and then ask for confirmation from them. Sometimes our people feel best seen when we just listen and acknowledge how they're feeling. I heard a great quote the other day from author David Augsburger that said, being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable. The last key attribute of empathy is responding and validating, letting them know they've been heard and that their pain and struggle is real and valid. And empathy isn't about minimizing their pain or rushing them through it or finding like a silver lining. It's about sitting with them, acknowledging their struggle, and then gently helping them regain some sense of power over what's next. And then there's this golden question of empathy. Here it is, the golden question. What does support look like for you? Instead of assuming what they need, ask them. We don't need to know what to say. Really, the best thing we can say to someone when they share something with us is, I don't even know what to say right now, but I'm really glad you told me. We do not need award-winning responses. Rarely does a response actually make something better. What makes someone actually feel better is connection. You just being there, not the things you say. So take off that pressure and just be there for your people. You say, what does support look like for you? I'm really glad you told me. Okay, so let's try this again with our friends Jake and Maria. But this time, we're going to go for empathy. So Jake, who's struggling with a big project, you could say, Jake, I can see this project is really overwhelming for you right now. I'm so glad you let me know how you're feeling. What's the hardest part for you right now? I want to support you in a way that works best for you. Did you hear it? This response acknowledges his feelings, gives him space to share, helps him regain perspective without keeping him stuck. For Maria, who just got laid off, an empathetic response would be, Maria, that's really tough. I can only imagine how overwhelming this must feel. I'm here for you. Do you want to talk about what's next, or do you just need some space to vent right now? This response acknowledges her hardship without trapping her in it, recognizes her emotions, and helps her regain some agency. And it meets her where she's at while offering real support. So this past fall, I lost both my maternal grandparents and my paternal grandmother all within just a few short months. So needless to say, it's had a big impact on me. But where I've had to really focus on empathy is when talking with my parents. Losing both of your parents so closely together is an unimaginable pain. And while they were my grandparents, they weren't my parents. And I realize that my parents' experience is different from mine. And because I love them, I often feel the urge to soften the blow. I catch myself wanting to say things like, at least they lived really long lives, or to find some silver lining in their grief. But I know deep down that nothing I can say can change what's happened. So I'm working on empathy, on simply validating and supporting them. Some days they may want to talk about the great memories. Other days they might need space to express how much they miss them. And some days they might not want to talk about it at all. So true empathy meets people where they're at without minimizing the grief or the hardness and trying to fix sadness. But instead, for me and my parents, it's letting them know I love them and that I'm here for them. And if I'm being completely honest, as workplace leaders, we often care more about results than we do about empathy. We prioritize performance over people, their hearts, their minds, and what they're going through. And that's a problem. If performance is an issue, then yeah, you got to put on your grown-up pants and address that. But first, let's care about our people. Let's see them as humans and not our worker bees. This is the real calling of leadership. And please, friend, don't let the lies of success and hurry tempt you to think otherwise. Now, when it comes to true empathy and leadership, it's easy to swing between extremes, offering too much or not enough. And if you're a naturally empathetic person, you're deeply attuned to others' emotions, you may find yourself absorbing those feelings, which can be so draining. We can't bear everyone else's burdens and emotions. We got to set clear boundaries or we're going to burn out. So here's how you're going to do that. You're going to ask yourself a couple questions. Here they are. How can you hold space for someone without taking on their emotions? What is your approach for showing care while protecting your own emotional well-being? Are there professional resources or support you can connect your team members to if they're in a season of distress? What situations might trigger an emotional response in you, and how can you manage them? Who can you call on to help support your team if you can't? These are important questions you need to ask. True empathy requires tapping into your own emotions, but to do so in a sustainable way, it is crucial to set boundaries and maintain your own support system. Okay, do you see how different empathy is from sympathy? We need empathy as leaders. Instead of dragging people deeper into their struggles, we reflect back their feelings, helping them regain perspective. Instead of saying, wow, that's terrible, we say, I hear you. That's really tough. What would be helpful right now? Sympathy might feel nice in the moment, but only empathy gives people hope to move forward. So leaders, let's stop silver lining things. Let's stop trying to rescue people or just get them through it so we can all move on. Instead, let's meet them where they are and help them build the confidence to move forward. That's the kind of leadership that creates connection. And that kind of leadership is the leadership that builds thriving teams. Okay, thanks for tuning in to Culture Keepers today. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a fellow leader. And let's keep this conversation going. Let me know if this was helpful for you by dropping a comment if you're watching on YouTube. But if you're watching on a podcast platform, I would love it if you would leave a rating and review. And lastly, do not forget to jump on my list and get my weekly leadership tip. You can grab that link in the show notes. Until next time, friends, let's continue to show empathy. I'm cheering you on.